Have you ever helped a stranger, only to discover they were carrying a secret that could change your life forever? On the coldest night of the year, when most people stayed safely inside, one exhausted single father made a choice that seemed impossible. He stopped in the middle of a raging blizzard to help a woman trapped in a snow-covered car. He thought he was simply saving a life. He had no idea that the woman he rescued was one of the most powerful CEOs in America, and that she had been hiding a heartbreaking secret that would leave him speechless. Before we begin, if stories about kindness, hope, and second chances inspire you, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to spread kindness, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support helps us share more stories that remind the world kindness still matters. David Harper had learned that life rarely went according to plan. 3 years earlier, he had lost his wife to cancer, leaving him to raise his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, on his own. Every morning he packed her lunch, braided her hair the best he could, and worked long hours as a delivery driver just to keep the lights on. Money was always tight, but David never allowed his daughter to feel poor. He believed that love could fill the empty spaces where money could not. One December evening, after finishing his final delivery, David drove carefully through a dangerous blizzard. Snow covered the roads, and the freezing wind shook his old pickup truck. All he wanted was to get home to Lily, who was waiting with their tiny Christmas tree glowing in the living room. Then he noticed something unusual. Half buried in the snow was a luxury SUV with its hazard lights blinking weakly. Most cars continued driving. The weather was too dangerous to stop. David slowed down. He knew stopping could put his own life at risk. But he also knew someone inside that vehicle might not survive another hour. He pulled over, wrapped his old winter coat tightly around himself, and fought through the deep snow. Inside the SUV sat a woman in her early 40s. She looked pale, frightened, and unable to move. A wheelchair was folded in the back seat. "My name is David," he said gently. "I'm here to help." The woman forced a weak smile. "My phone died. I couldn't call anyone." David realized she was paralyzed from the waist down. Her vehicle had slid into a snowbank, and the engine had stopped running nearly an hour earlier. Without hesitation, David carried blankets from his truck, warmed her with his emergency heater, and called rescue services using the last bit of battery on his phone. Because of the storm, help would take at least another hour. So David stayed. He kept talking to her, making simple conversation to keep her awake. They spoke about Christmas memories, favorite books, and the strange way life could surprise people. She introduced herself only as Emma. When rescue workers finally arrived, they thanked David for refusing to leave. As the ambulance doors closed, Emma reached for his hand. "You didn't even know me," she whispered. David smiled. "You don't need to know someone's name to know they need help." He waved goodbye and drove home, believing he would never see her again. 2 weeks later, David received an unexpected phone call. A polite assistant invited him to the headquarters of Harper Technologies, one of the country's largest companies. David assumed there had been some mistake. When he entered the executive office, his heart nearly stopped. Sitting behind the massive desk was Emma. Only now she wore an elegant business suit instead of a winter coat. She smiled warmly. "I finally get to thank the man who saved my life." David stood frozen. "You're the CEO." Emma laughed softly. "I am." She explained that after a skiing accident years earlier, she had lost the use of her legs. Since then, she had hidden her disability from many business partners, fearing they would see weakness instead of leadership. The night of the blizzard, she had been driving home after secretly visiting a rehabilitation center that offered experimental treatments. "I've spent years surrounded by people who respect my position," Emma said quietly. "But that night, you respected me simply because I was another human being." David didn't know what to say. Emma continued. "I asked my team to learn everything about you." David became nervous. "I'm sorry if I..." She interrupted with a smile. You have nothing to apologize for. She had discovered his financial struggles, the medical bills from his late wife, and the sacrifices he made every single day for Lily. Then Emma surprised him. I'd like to offer you a job. David blinked. A job? Our company needs someone to lead a new community outreach program. We want to help struggling families across America. After seeing your compassion, I can't imagine anyone more qualified. David had no business degree. He had never managed employees. He wasn't even sure he belonged inside such an impressive building. Emma seemed to read his thoughts. Kindness can't be taught in business school, she said. You already have the most important qualification. David accepted. Over the following months, his life slowly changed. His salary allowed him to move into a safer home. Lily finally had her own bedroom. For the first time in years, David didn't worry every night about unpaid bills. But Emma's greatest secret still remained. One afternoon, she invited David to visit the rehabilitation center. There she stood carefully, holding on to support bars. With determination shining in her eyes, she took 3 slow steps. David smiled so widely that tears filled his eyes. Emma laughed through happy tears. I wanted someone who believed in me before success to see this moment. Months of therapy had finally begun working. She still faced a long journey, but she had hope again. You gave me more than rescue that night, she said. You reminded me that I wasn't alone. David shook his head. I think you rescued me too. He explained that after losing his wife, he had started believing the world had become cold and unfair. Helping Emma reminded him that even small acts of kindness still mattered. As Christmas arrived again, Harper Technologies hosted a celebration for hundreds of struggling families. Children laughed while opening presents. Parents shared warm meals. Volunteers filled the hall with smiles instead of stress. Emma watched proudly from her wheelchair. David stood beside Lily, who whispered, Daddy, is this why you stopped in the snow? He smiled. Yes. She squeezed his hand. I'm glad you did. David realized that one simple decision on a freezing night had changed countless lives. Not because he expected a reward. Not because he knew who Emma was. But because kindness always creates ripples we cannot see. Sometimes the person you help becomes your greatest blessing. Sometimes your smallest act becomes someone else's reason to keep believing. And sometimes, the greatest miracles begin with nothing more than choosing not to drive past a stranger in need. If this story touched your heart, remember that kindness never asks for permission, wealth, or perfect timing. It only asks for courage. The smallest act of compassion can become the beginning of someone else's new life, and maybe your own. So wherever you are today, choose kindness, offer hope, and never underestimate the difference one caring heart can make. Together, let's continue to spread kindness and make the world a little brighter, one good deed at a time.